doing a phenomenal job on staying pretty much on time with all the movement. That was pretty good, so give yourselves a hand. I'm actually, I assume by now we'd be a little behind, so we're actually doing pretty well. So you guys have done a phenomenal job here. So we're going to quickly move into the kind of the panel portion of the day. This will be about an hour, so we encourage you guys to be very interactive, ask questions, you know, really, as I said earlier this morning, take advantage of the people we have with us, get some questions out on the table, and make this high-value expense of your time. So what we have in front of us here are a team of very, very skilled, very knowledgeable people in their individual kind of field of play. So, whoops. Yeah. So what we've asked a couple of co-sponsors to help us with the day. So what we've got represented in front of us are our co-sponsors of the day. I'm going to just go briefly through who they are and their company, and then when they have an opportunity to speak individually, they can talk a little bit more about themselves, their company, credential themselves, and talk about why they chose today to be with us and kind of the connection to the overall subject matter of the cyber threat and cybersecurity and information protection. So with that, kind of sitting right here in front of me is Mike Stovsky of Benesch Law. Mike is a partner and also the chair of their Innovations, Information Technology, and Intellectual Property Group. Mike holds the title of the longest title of the panel, so I applaud you for that. So there's a lot going on there. Spencer Timmel is over there in between Dave and Ryan, and Spencer works for Hylant Insurance, specifically in the cyber insurance space. So Spencer's here to talk to us a little bit about what Hylant is doing specifically with insurance and the insuring companies around this particular issue.
So half of them fall asleep and the other half cringe when he said insurance.
Yeah, no, not at all. Samantha Calixto is also with us with Software One. Software One is a portfolio management, asset management software solution. And Sam is here to talk to us about how their business interacts with the information security and cyber security people within organizations that they work with. Also with us is you've met Ryan earlier. He was one of the people that was herding us around earlier. Ryan is our EVP of sales, both on the TrustedSec side and the BDS side. So he kind of oversees sales for both organizations. I actually work for Ryan. So be nice to Ryan when you're talking to him individually. And Ryan's going to talk to us specifically about TrustedSec and kind of how they kind of interact not only with this subject matter, also maybe touch on how the companies are related a little bit as well. And then Dave Kennedy over there in the corner. Needs no introduction, co-founder and CTO of BDS, and also the founder and CEO and president of TrustedSec. So representing today BDS. All right? So with that, why don't we start with, we'll just go in order here, Mike. If you want to kind of talk a little bit about yourself, your firm, and tell us a little bit about why you thought this was a good idea to participate with us today.
Well, sure. I'm a partner at Benesch. We're a very large law firm. We have 7 offices, including one in Shanghai. And I run basically the intellectual property and technology practice of the firm. We have a lot of clients in the room. I know a lot of people here. So many of you know what we do. But we're a full-service intellectual property and technology practice. My practice is in the technology deal world. So we negotiate technology transactions of all sorts, including major implementation deals, cloud deals, etc. We're outside counsel at BDS, and the other thing that we do quite a bit of, a major part of our practice is in data security and privacy, both front-end compliance and the back-end compliance, and response to data security breaches. We've handled some of the largest data security breaches from the legal side that have happened in this region over the last 5 to 7 years. So that's a little bit about that.
Thanks. Spencer.
Yeah, absolutely. Spencer Timmel from Hylant. As you mentioned, Hylant is traditionally an insurance broker, full-service broker. We have 14 offices across the Midwest, one of the largest privately held brokerages in the country. I came aboard with Hylant about 9 years ago, actually, and we really found a niche in the data privacy and security space, insurance space, and because we had a lot of large retailers out of the Columbus area, who were clients of ours, and they kept clamoring about, we have all this data, we have all this credit card information, how do we manage the risk, how do we transfer the risk, can somebody come help us out? And not many folks 9 or 10 years ago were doing that at all. And so we have really found a niche and become the broker of choice in the data privacy, risk management, and transfer space.
Awesome. Thanks, Betsy. Samantha.
I hope I can go that fast. So I'm Samantha Calixto. I'm with Software One. We are a privately held, both national and global organization. We are in about 89 countries brick and mortar, and we help support about 115 countries globally. Our U.S. headquarters is in Wisconsin, and our global headquarters is in Switzerland. With being a global organization, we manage relationships with about 9,000 publishers globally. Publishers being Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, which I'm sure you've all heard of: Microsoft, VMware, Cisco, Linux, Red Hat, you name it. We most likely have a relationship with them. We use those relationships to negotiate for our customers, and we also make sure that what they're utilizing is appropriate to their IT environment. With that being said, our conversations with customers have drastically changed due to the security, because when you are planning strategically for your IT environment, we want to know what you're doing security-wise and what publishers or vendors you may need to get from your current situation to your desired. So that's where we are here today.
Sure. So, Ryan Burnheimer, I'm representing TrustedSec here, even though the founder is right next to me, but so a little bit awkward. But, so, IT
The founder of all
security.
companies, so we
Yeah,
have
no, that's fun.
I'm actually critiquing a sales presentation.
100%. You guys are more than welcome to too. So I actually work with a lot of you right now anyways, but we're an IT security consulting firm that founded by Dave that does things differently than a lot of the IT security consulting firms out there. So we're looking for more, not just, we do penetration testing, application security testing, build programs out, but a lot of what we do is built on not only identifying flaws within your security position right now, but how can we help you build out your program so that we don't find the same vulnerabilities now, and make recommendations towards improving you for the long term. We have teams dedicated to working on your governance risk and compliance aspects. So if you're looking for PCI compliance, for HIPAA compliance, we can help you build out your program, but also work with your development team to help train them. We have a lot of different services within that we can customize towards whatever you're looking to get out of an engagement. So that's a very high level.
Mr. Kennedy, talk about BDS.
Okay, I was wondering to say Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
He's very formal, so we had to call him Mr.
What was interesting is I was a chief security officer over at Diebold, and it's weird when you go to your wife and you have a great job, pushing, everything's going well, you have a phenomenal team, and things can go be better, and you go to your wife and with newly born twins and another 3-year-old at the time, and you say, hey, I want to quit Diebold and start my own company. And she's like, well, first of all, it's like shock, pale white, all that good stuff, but afterwards, when she's supportive, I went and started TrustedSec. And the goal was, with TrustedSec, was to really build a group of folks that I could trust, a group of folks that I could build as friends. Like Ryan, for example, the way Ryan and I met, and I love the story, is that my wife and his wife were walking dogs outside in an apartment complex when I first got out of the military, and I got introduced to Ryan and we became best friends. And and so the folks at TrustedSec were all good friends of mine, and folks from Diebold as well, and folks from other places. But I always had the mindset of building BDS. There's a book out there that I tested, I just read recently, it's called Originals. And it's about how to disrupt what we consider normal behavior or normal patterns in what's acceptable for today. And so I started BDS to really try to change the industry, the security industry, for better, because I see a lot of things that are going to happen today, but I also see the things that are going to happen tomorrow. And my goal is to try to get ahead of that, to try to fix things. And so I've surrounded myself with folks that I know can get the job done and do it. Folks that I trust, folks that I've known for years, folks that I have all the confidence in, folks that are way smarter than me. That come in and really our goal is to try to change the industry and steer it in a way that you can start to detect the attackers. And so that's where BDS originated from. It was always in my mind when I first left Diebold to get to this point where I'm at today. And that's really where.
Thanks. So thanks to the panel. So kind of the way we want to kind of roll this is you kind of know what they do, how they do it. Please, if you guys have questions for either the panel or individual members of the panel, please feel free to just kind of jump in and ask your questions. Anyone? Anyone want to get the ball rolling?
Are any of you helping do tabletop exercises for companies? And if you are, how are you facilitating those?
I am, and we do them all the time. We're asked to participate with the entire security team of the company. Oftentimes, they begin doing this, the conception of it comes from the company, and they're getting other outside people involved, trusted advisors. The best ones that I've been involved with, and I think it was mentioned earlier in one of the discussions, are tabletops that are actually run by the FBI. They'll come in, they'll help you willingly. They really like doing it, and they help to facilitate the tabletops. But we have lots of clients doing tabletop exercises now regularly.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest pushes for us on the risk management side. We team up with legal folks, FBI, other types of law enforcement. At the end of the day, the best way to manage the event is to be prepared and execute properly the first time.
It's actually something we do we don't charge to do it. We just come in and we'll sit down and try to be a resource what your practice has been.
And we have, from a security perspective, we have incident response scenarios and tabletop exercises for simulating breaches and how you respond and getting kind of everybody into. In fact, I'm going to put Mick Douglas on the spot, who I talked about people that are smarter than me back there. Mick is in charge of, we both brain out all the time,
Yeah.
but Mick actually runs a team that handles the tabletop exercises and what we do from that side. But it's working with organizations to simulate, hey, in the event that a breach occurs, how do you handle that? How do you respond to that? What are your procedures in place? How do you get better? Working with corporate communications, with legal, with all the different areas to kind of understand what that means to minimize the damage to your company. We find that practice makes perfect sense.
Well, I think doing it the right way the first time allows an organization to continue to have the perception that they're still the victim in the event. It's when you screw up the incident response is when you kind of change from, you lose that victim status, and that's when huge liabilities come out, class actions, the plaintiff's attorneys start ruling, regulators start asking more and more questions, bringing investigation and reputational injury, right? Yeah, absolutely. So prepare, and ensure that you are continue to be the victim in these types of events.
If you're a company out there that can control, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I would say is that if you're in a regulated business,
Tell them to stop sign.
the lawyer always jumps. If you're in a regulated business, if you're in healthcare, if you're in financial services, a business is regulated from a privacy and security perspective. Tabletops are becoming the bar. That's you have to do a risk assessment in most of those businesses. Companies outside of regulated businesses should do it anyway, but if you're in a regulated business and you're doing a risk assessment, tabletop's part of the game.
We can also provide, not so much on the security, well, it'll end up in the security piece, but we'll do a software asset management engagement, which we can do an actual publisher engagement, which if you want to focus specifically on a specific software or publisher, or we can also do it as a service. So the reason that the as a service kind of was birthed was because you can't really control your end user all the time, right? They don't always run to their IT department and say, hey, I really need this. How do I go about getting it the appropriate way? So SAM as a service can kind of keep an eye on what software is being downloaded, what do you have out in your environment that you don't necessarily have, the rights to, and that can be a security force as well. So.
And I think from a reputation perspective, you see companies that are prepared, have a much better handling around the situation, they command the situation, and they're able to deal with it in a way that really takes the public's perspective and says, okay, these folks, experience breach, we accept that. Breaches are going to be a normal occurrence, are a normal occurrence, will continue to be a normal occurrence. But, minimizing the damage, commanding what you're going to do, fixing that, having things already lined up ready to go. It's interesting is we hear the big term of ransomware right now, which seems to be an extremely large, buzzword that a lot of folks are really concerned with. And what's interesting is we had a customer that contacted us and asked how they could bake in ransomware procedures into their business continuity and incident response, plans. And the first question they asked was, how do I buy Bitcoin so I can pay the ransom to handle that? And I'm like, that's the wrong way of thinking, all right, let's go this way first. And that's unprepared, right? Having to pay the ransom, but that's what happened with the hospital. Hospital got hit, it was, California, got hit, they paid, 15 grand in ransom, and what's funny is that the ransomware folks, they posted a thing afterwards saying that they didn't realize that the hospital was so big or they would have charged a lot more. So they actually got a little bit left out of there pretty unscathed for 15 grand, but it's interesting to see the companies that can handle it to respond quickly, to remediate it and get up and running, minimize the exposure of that type of information, really shine in the media when they get taken down.
Speaking of ransomware, are you, as an insurance company, being asked about ransomware insurance? It's very visible, very high profile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that-
Yeah, from both angles. Just with a large integrated health system out of the Cincinnati area yesterday, they asked us that same question. Help us develop an incident response plan, and how the heck do we buy Bitcoin? It's like, well, wait a second, let's slow this down. And the challenge is, it's for $10,000 or $15,000, it's much cheaper than trying to build in other processes and get through the red tape within the organization to increase the IT security budget or the backup budget or whatever it is. We absolutely are getting those types of questions from the risk management and the insurance side. And the insurance does provide protection and pays not only expenses tied to the extortion ban, but actually pays the extortion ban also. The biggest difficulty with that is that usually if you're a sizable organization at all, you're probably taking $100,000 deductible, $250,000, $500,000, and from experience that these extortions tend to be relatively small, right? They fly under the radar. So we do more on the preparedness side than the actual risk transfer side.
Question here?
Yeah, besides healthcare and finance, are there any particular kinds of industries or businesses that are targets for the hackers? Everyone like the old cycles do.
Everyone, and that's a great thing. Even from my business perspective, we are not bound to a specific industry vertical. We're not bound because hackers go after what's there. And it's actually interesting. The hacker market for ransomware is getting so saturated with other hackers that are developing more ransomware that they've moved to Max. Because it's just so saturated in the Windows side that so many people are getting infected from all different demographics and all different industry verticals that we experienced first was they put ransomware on a thing called Transmission. It's a BitTorrent client. But you do it and encrypt your Mac, so they're actually moving more towards Macs now as well because it's becoming so popular.
Towards the Macintosh?
Yeah, but we see getting most hit right now is medical because they're usually 10, 15 years behind general security practices that we consider that today, which is really scary. It's really bad today. But education is also pretty bad as well. Being targeted pretty.
We're seeing to add to that. We're seeing the same thing, but e-commerce websites for different sorts of
Big
things.
e-commerce websites, like Land's End.
Not even that. They don't even have to be that big. We had a client that manages 30 to 35 sites. They do 60 million in sales on those sites. They got an email last week from the Armada Collective, I think was yeah. Well, right. Were they real or are they fake? That was kind of their challenge. They were having difficulty determining what was a valid extortion demand or not. So, but they did not pay the extortion.
Question?
So you said take advantage of the panel, so I was going to mean to Dave, but I decided not to. So this is really, I think it's probably more for Michael, but anyone else jump in. So what are your thoughts on the FTC and Section 5 reasonable security?
Well, look, the FTC is talking about Section 5 of the FTC Act, which is a federal statute, and essentially it is the statute that governs false disclosures. Essentially where the FTC gets involved in data security and privacy is when you publish a security policy or a privacy policy and then you don't do what you say you do. You can be enforced against by the FTC. In addition to that, the FTC has published a whole bunch of guidelines on privacy and data security, which really are not all that meaningful in the world that we're talking about here because they are the floor, the absolute floor on data security and privacy practices, good practices. And And so, you know, relying on those is, or relying on those in terms of your compliance efforts is really not a good practice. They don't, it's not state of the art, it's not best practices, which are much, much higher than what the FTC would counsel you to do if you go and bully their stuff.
Saying the federal government is not up to speed.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing, amazing what, you know, yeah, it is.
We're gonna fix that. We're gonna fix it fast.
Yeah, but, you know, the bottom line
That was
is,
a
though,
terrible film.
there is real risk.
It took me a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is real risk for companies, though, if you do publish a policy, and you don't do what you say you do. You will be enforced against. It can be nasty. There are fines and penalties, and that sort of thing. It could eventually become public. It's not good. So you never want the FTC on your back. The good news is, like the FTC offices in different regions, they differ in how high the quality is. In Cleveland, the FTC office is excellent, and the people there are really common sense. So, you know, if they're going to handle incidents that happen in this region, you know, you got more of a friend than an adversary in the FTC in this region. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, so we talked a little earlier about it's not a matter of if but when, right? And we know that law enforcement gets involved for the most part when it happens. We also know that we see things like the new CISA law that's been signed, and the SEC is setting up regional offices to do drop-in inspections. I'm hearing from some of my friends in the critical infrastructure space, a lot of those inspectors are moving over to the financial world to do those drop-in inspections. The question for the panel is, where do we see cybersecurity going with regard to government intervention and private industry? I don't mean intervention in a bad way, I mean that potentially in a good way, if it's possible. But where do we see that going over the next 3 to 5 years with regard to government involvement and private industry in this
Great question.
I can think of this in the initial. So I think, you know, if you look historically, the largest and most technical compliance regulatory program we had is PCI, right? And they were kind of ahead of the curve when it came to what you had to do to comply to house credit card data. Now you're seeing a lot of initiatives around the cyber areas around trying to get a hold of not only just encryption, but just general security best practices and what you're doing in general. I think, you know, from a federal government perspective, and I can actually tell you this confidently because I do actually still work with a lot of the folks in the House and Senate around legislation that's coming out. I testified twice in front of Congress on much other stuff, and I still talk to the technology committee as well as some of the other ones out there that are doing a lot of these laws. And so, and a lot of my good friends, so they're actually going to industry experts, asking them some good stuff. Now, I don't know if you saw the Democrat Feinstein. She's going with an encryption law that basically says that, you know, you have to basically give up all the keys and the government should have access no matter what, which is the exact opposite, in my opinion, of what we should be doing. So you're going to see, I think, from a government perspective, a federal government perspective, I think that they're going to really struggle a bit on the balance around what the federal government can and can't do. It's going to be challenged quite a bit. And hopefully we have good and healthy debates around what should be used and mandated around, you know, private corporations to have specific security controls. But I think the debates are going to be more so about what's the topic at hand. Like, for example, the Apple battle 100% spawned the encryption debate, right? They're not looking at what they need to do from a critical infrastructure or what they need to do from a overall perspective. The federal government can't even, the way that they source IT security is like a car part. You know, so they're so far behind when it comes to understanding the parts of that and even securing their own federal government infrastructure, but they're mostly focused on the encryption debate right now. So I don't see that changing much. I do see regulators like the FDIC, I see them getting more mature. Even State of New York came out recently with some very strict guidelines around you know, specific controls and putting there, you know, you must have two-factor authentication, you must have this, you must have this. So I think more of the local, you know, it's like federal, instead of federal, being more state and local ones, especially when it comes to more regulated areas like financial, will be a big boom. But not necessarily like the legal industry vertical doesn't have much when it comes to regulation, but they're starting to realize, just from a private industry perspective, that they house a lot of intellectual property and critical data, so they're getting more concerned on it just from fixing them themselves.
So, yeah, from my perspective, it's a real mixed bag. That's why I say it's a great question. So, David's absolutely right. The federal government is like, you know, the right hand isn't talking to the left hand. The state governments are way far ahead of that. You know, we have data breach. We have data security law in many states and data breach notification law in every state except one, South Dakota.
I was just there 2 weeks ago, surprisingly.
You know, South Dakota's the banking state. They rely on the federal banking so the states have always been way far ahead. Some of the states have incorporated PCI into their statutory regime. So it's like you must use PCI even if you're not a payment card issuer. It's crazy. And but the states are way far ahead. The feds, not so much. We take a sectoral approach to data security and privacy in this country, much different than the governments of foreign countries, which take a much more comprehensive omnibus approach. One area that the feds are, I think, really starting to play in effectively is in information sharing. So there are a number of regional initiatives, one right here in our region, for information sharing between and among private actors led by the feds. So they're starting to put those kinds of consortia together to enable information sharing and take some of the risk out of it for companies.
Even from an infographic perspective, which is FBI driven, they become very open to types of information that they're sharing and doing a lot more cross sharing with private companies and different things that are happening. So you're seeing, I think, a little bit more release of information from the government around what's actually happening out there. And even public statements going after people like in China or in Russia, or going after individuals and publicly showing that. So I think the government's getting a little more keen on being able to show certain things that are happening out there, but I definitely don't think they're in a position. I mean, this isn't an insult at all to our government. It's a generational thing. They're literally at a kindergarten level when it comes to understanding technology. And that's not their job, but they are at a kindergarten level when it comes to technology. I had a Democrat from Texas, and I'm not a Democrat Republican, I equally hate all of them. I am we're considering me an anarchist apparently. What's interesting enough about, there was actually a Democrat in Texas, which was really weird too, but the Democrat from Texas, posed a question to me when I was testifying in front of Congress, and she was like, well, I don't understand why we need to build security in healthcare.gov. Websites get hacked all the time, we'll just fix it after. And I'm like, well, that's after all the information is stolen. She's like, well, yeah. I'm like, yeah. And so it's a very basic level of understanding when it comes to the folks that are making the laws. But one thing that they do understand is that the government does need to provide more information to the private sector on that sharing piece. And that's where, you saw successful groups like the FIC, and now they're spawning off FICs into different industry verticals now for collaboration and sharing with different groups. So that piece is working, so the government's starting to see that as well. So I can agree.
I'm going to be a little bit different here and ask a question of the audience also. Being CISOs in the audience would be the question too. What do you think about this information sharing? What are your organizations when you go back and you have an event and you say, hey, I'm going to go share this with the regulators? Any comments from the audience?
I love it. Yeah. So we've got a daily thread going in the retail vertical, at least, with a bunch of other retailers out there. Very open. They're sharing indicators of compromise that they've seen in on their own systems, detected by all sorts of different tools. Sure. So it's a good visibility, I think.
I'll jump in, because I'm shy. So it's interesting, because there's all this talk about information sharing. There's been a lot of information sharing going on for a long time, decades. The problem is it's been kind of low-key. It's based on web of trust, and web of trust doesn't scale, right? So I'll use NCFTA as an example. They run various information sharing groups. President Obama has held them up as an example, other folks have. And now we're spawning off all these other information sharing groups. FSISAC, well, you have FSISAC, but then you have BITS.
Did I see FIC earlier?
Yes.
Sorry.
There's a lot more information sharing going on within BITS, which is a smaller group than FSISAC. Right? So it's a subset. So it's interesting, everybody's talking about information sharing, but A, it's been going on, but it's been done in a way that doesn't scale. But B, the real question is, so what do you show? Right? Was it
Credit cards. I think that's a good point of what information do you share that's useful in order to help identify what's happening as far as trends in the industry. And I think that's been the biggest challenge with when the groups becoming larger. FSISAC is a good example of that. A lot of the data is stagnant, old, or it may not be relevant to what you're actually going after. Some of it is. And so I think, from a sharing of information, it needs to be tangible, it needs to be relevant, but it also, for me, my groups, like a new exploit comes out, I know about it, 3 weeks before a new exploit comes out, but that's because I have that web of trust that I wouldn't, use anywhere else. So, it's an interesting concept. I don't know what the best answer for information sharing is, but at the same time, you have to be doing it to understand what's happening out there. I think I spoke a bit.
So, my background, I came from the nuclear world. We have Nuclear Energy Institute out of Washington. They're a consortium basically of all the nuclear power generators across the country. And so you have to be very careful when you're dealing with your specific question about regulators. Because when you deal with regulators, anything you tell them, anything you give them is considered a discovery, right? You can use it before the law and they can use it to indict you. So you have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. The NEI group out of Washington would be a very good model for us to look at as an industry. They provided that communication with the regulators for the most part. They were very good about sanitizing it, ensuring it was positioned in the right way, and provided the liaison between the industry and the regulators themselves. So those types of consortiums are really very valuable.
Question here?
How did they hack that law firm in Panama? Who did it?
Well, it wasn't just Panama. 2 of the largest law firms in the world in New York were hacked a few weeks ago.
Information wasn't published though, was it?
It's not published.
What's interesting is with the Panama stuff, they didn't actually publish anything in the United States, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, it could have been us.
Absolutely, sure. I'm not.
I won't ask any more questions.
So that,
No, but it brings up a point that there was actually a group out of what was the hacking team out of?
Italy.
Italy, thank you. So there was a group called the hacking team out of Italy, and what they did is they wrote software and exploits for governments, and they would sell these exploits and these tools. It's basically a tool that would go in and attack people so that they could, if you think of most forming governments, they don't have cyber capabilities, right? They don't have the people that develop exploits and tools and stuff like that, like the U.S., that China, that Russia does. And so this group called the hacking team made their whole business model on selling to governments, especially oppressive governments, all these cyber tools that actively hack into people that may be, opposing to their government or opposing to other people, and they launched campaigns, and the hacking team would help them out with those types of things. Well, they got hacked and basically published all of the hacking team's data on the internet, including who they're working with, points of contact, all their code for their tools, all their exploits, everything. In fact, a bunch of exploits got patched because of the hacking team disclosures. What you're actually seeing is a lot of companies out there like that spawning up that are offering these type of services to be able to do informational warfare. It's the same model that the bad hackers, the black hats, use for what they call exploit kits. You can go and buy an exploit kit online for $500 or $50, and then you go and you run your own England node that's coming out now. But what was most interesting about it is the hacker that broke into the hacking team published step by step how they did it. Like, hey, here's exactly what I did. Here's how I researched it. Here's how I got an initial point. And we were actually referenced twice in there for some research that they used from a couple of our blogs, which is interesting. Like, but hey, cool shout out, thanks man, appreciate it. But it showed like step by step exactly what they did to infiltrate this organization. And what was really interesting about that, and to circle back to your question of how did they hack them, the techniques that we use for what we call red team exercises or pen testing or whatever are the exact same techniques that these attackers are using. The first thing is they find their foothold in, whether it's a vulnerability on a website, or they go after the end users, and then from there, once they have their foothold, they move to the systems that they need access to, and that's exactly what this person did, and he detailed exactly what he did. He used this tool to go into here and did that, got access to this system, he found an admin that administered this box, and once he got access to that box, then he took the whole database and he started publishing online. So it's interesting to see that the techniques, while we're different sometimes in how we hack, they're all the same consistently across the board of how we actually go after an organization. So that was a good segue into probably how the law firm got compromised as well. It's very similar in nature. Good read, by the way.
So yeah, I was going to jump in and say
Great book.
the title is DIY Hacking, and it is an excellent one.
Yeah. I mean, he's like grammatically correct. I mean, he's skilled. He's like, hey, I saw they had this one system exposed, so then I figured out a vulnerability in it that did this and this and this, and he explains exactly how he did it. And for us technical guys, we're like, oh, hey, that's cool. We can use that in the future, or hey, you use that tool wrong,
But even he's like, oh, so if you have the Exchange servers, take all the email before you pivot into these systems.
Yeah.
Just It's interesting.
That's a good read.
So, question kind of for the panel, and kind of think of this in terms of your individual position, legal, privacy breach, security, insurance, cyber insurance, those types of things, selling software, talking to customers about the topic of breaching cybersecurity. I sell this stuff for a living, right? So I talk to a lot of customers, and one of the things I consistently get is, oh, we just make parts. We just do this. We're not a target. Who would want our stuff? Who would want to bother with us in terms of breaching our system? So you all on the panel have a day-to-day opportunity to talk to clients, whether they're your legal clients, your insurance clients. What do you say? How do you respond to people that say, oh, that's not important to us. We don't care about that because nobody really cares about us.
You know what, so I was just having this conversation with a colleague of mine and saying, hey, so there's all this stuff in the media right now about these big box tops that get hacked into, or all these breaches, and there's people blogging about them, and there's all this stuff going on, and yet still there's companies out there that don't put plans in place for when this does happen, right? And I'm baffled a little bit by that, because I'm thinking, man, I wouldn't want my company information if I was, head of security or whatever I was, to have a breach. Then I think about my position, and so you don't get to hear on the news or have the blogs written about XYZ company that was audited by Oracle, and now they owe $500,000 due to a terrible audit, right? So I struggle with the same thing. I wonder, okay, so you don't want to lead with scare tactics, right? Because obviously that's not working if our media is doing it. So what does work? And to Mick's point with his presentation is the preparation is key. So what are you going to do to make sure that all of your ducks are in a row? What are you going to do to make sure that what you're doing is preparing you for tomorrow or for a week from now? So I even think that in my position, I struggle with that as well, knowing that it's a problem. So what are we going to do about it besides the old scare tactic? I don't like that.
To me, you guys, the guys from TrustedSec and BDS can maybe verify this, but in my practice, we've learned over the last almost a decade of doing this work is that well over 90% of the data security breaches have nothing to do with industries that you would think are traditionally the favorites of hackers. Okay,
Banks.
We get calls from the weirdest, niche services that you possibly
100%. Listen, the biggest breaches that we've handled have been brick and mortar manufacturing companies. Okay, so why? If this is where the real breaches are happening, not the ones you read about on the front page of the paper, but the ones that are happening every day that you don't read about, there must be something valuable there. What's valuable? Trade secrets are valuable. Okay, employee information is incredibly valuable. There is, healthcare stuff and financial stuff, but there's a wealth of information, and these guys could talk about this all day long in entities that don't really think that they have valuable information. Industries that you would think are as far removed from this, like the trucking industry, logistics industry, is a massive target, okay? And they do things really badly, okay? Why? They've got tons of employees, and employee data is fundamentally important to hackers. So, we're seeing most of the breaches in businesses that have nothing to do with retail, not the big anthems, not the targets, not the things we're reading about every day. Basic brick and mortar businesses, that's where the activity is from our perspective. And we don't get called unless there's activity.
I think there's a report out there from a large forensics firm. I'm sure you all know, but they state, I think, that the most breaches in one specific industry, I think it was healthcare. It was 13%.
Yeah.
So 13% in the largest industry. This is usually you see a wheel where 3/4 of it is 3 industries and then the rest, right? Really breaks it out.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, if you look at demographics, everybody wonders, well, how did ransomware come about? And ransomware actually came and spawned off of the Carter market that had a much harder time of getting bulk access to credit card data, because as soon as Target happened, everybody started freaking out. They started encrypting in volume all of their credit card data, and so it became very difficult for attackers to get access to the bulk amount of credit cards, and so they moved to ransomware, which is a much more profitable market for them because they can impact any company. and do these mass campaigns. You know, send emails. They go to the Fortune 1000 list and they send mass emails out, and then boom, they get one week they get 5%, and 5% they get $500,000. That's a good return. So it's interesting to see, like, in talking about the different verticals, each one has their own areas that they're very important to make money off of. Or you look at some of the things like we call state-sponsored actors, whatever, right? China's really on research. R&D is their big one right now. Medical research is a big one. All the other ones. So they have different motives and demographics based off of what their economy needs at their specific time, so they can snag and grab. Manufacturing is a big part of that because they manufacture a large percentage of the things that are here in the United States. So can I steal something from a company that manufactures something here in the United States and then sell it in the United States for half the cost next year? And so, it makes perfect sense economically because they're making a ton of money off of our own research, our own IP, and everything else that they're doing out there. And even from a logistics company, how do they do logistics in the United States? How do I get into that? How do I actually, make a company that can go and do that and be successful? So it's interesting to see the different markets. You have Russia that's really more on the organized crime front, and that's where a lot of the ransomware is spawning from. So it's just interesting to see the different demographics and what they're actually going for. Go ahead, Jim.
To spin off that, actually, I have a question for Mike as well. So, something else that a lot of people don't look at when they're saying, oh, I'm not a target, I'm not an anthem or whatever, is they're not paying attention to their upstream and downstream partners, right? So if I have an HVAC vendor, who does work with a retailer, I'm obviously supporting them. So, along with that, from a legal side, so let's say you're a smaller business and you get compromised, and because you got compromised, your upstream partner got compromised. So, from a legal standpoint, how does that play in everything?
Well, again, it depends on the industry you're in. Okay, so if you're in a regulated business like healthcare, a couple of years ago, the Obama administration, in their infinite wisdom, expanded HIPAA to pull these downstream entities, business associates, into the full panoply of regulation. Okay, now they have to comply with HIPAA security rule as if they are a covered entity. They never had to do that before. So if you're in healthcare and you're a downstream vendor, you got a big compliance obligation if you touch protected health information. Other businesses that are not regulated, you're not going to be bound legally to necessarily comply, but you're going to be forced as a business practice. Like law is a great example. We are a downstream vendor to lots of different companies. And because they have regulatory obligations or they just want to be more secure, they force it on us. So now they're requiring us, even though we're not required by law, in many instances, they're requiring us to enhance our security. So that's the way it's really playing out. So, if you're a downstream vendor in financial services or healthcare in the United States, you've always been bound, you have to comply, and you have to have pretty significant security measures in place. By the way, a lot of what we've been talking about today is the United States. In foreign markets, the law is substantially more strict. And downstream vendors have been required for years to be more fully compliant with security rules. I'm not saying they are, but they've been required to be under the law in like Europe, Canada, for example, some of the more major enlightened markets in the world that have had this law in place.
So Michael, you mentioned other countries, and I'm not a lawyer, and I can play one on TV. So Canada recently came out with a requirement for breach logs. Right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I'd like to talk not just about Canada, but most of the world has. That is just one example of a regulatory move in a foreign country that is significantly more strict than we have in the United States, but impacts companies that do business abroad. Okay, so you got a business, you got facilities or employees in those countries. You are now going to be pulled into the purview of their law. You got facilities in Canada. Many U.S. companies do, obviously, is a good example. So now you got to try to figure out what law do I comply with. Do I comply with the strictest standard, which means data breach laws, etc., or do I try to comply with two different sets of laws? One for my U.S. operations, one for my Canadian operations. Very difficult. Europe is another obvious example of that. Last year the European Court did away with the safe harbor for data transfers between the U.S. and Europe, and now we're going to get a new regulatory establish Safe Harbor 2.0, and again, permit U.S. companies to transmit data to and from Europe. But again, if you got operations in Europe and you have employees in Europe, you got to comply with the European standard, and it's substantially more strict than the U.S. standard in most areas.
So the specific thing I was interested in hearing
Yeah.
about is a lot of the discussion I'm seeing, because the breach log requirement hasn't come into effect yet, but discovery in the U.S., so you're supposed to be keeping this log of any incidents that may have potentially resulted in disclosure, inappropriate disclosure of protected data. And so now somebody comes along in the U.S., as soon as it goes for discovery for, hey, here's every incident that you've ever had. So
Right.
that's,
Absolutely, you know, it does impact things like that. The laws are not harmonious. We don't have a harmonizing body, you know, to make the laws really harmonize with each other. Listen, that is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the new safe harbor that's going to be put into place with Europe, you know what the penalty under that safe harbor is?
2 to 4% of your gross annual revenue.
4% annual gross revenue. 4%, that is the penalty for violating the new safe harbor that's going to be in place with Europe. You got contact with Europe, you got people in Europe, that's your potential penalty. So logs, I mean, and I think data breach logs are actually going to be part of Safe Harbor 2.0 as well. So you got, you know, there's all sorts of things that are going to keep BDS and TrustedSec like in business and home along protecting
It's the right market.
Yeah.
Interesting enough of that too, I think, since it's not out there yet, but it'll be tested quite a bit. Like, can you request all incidents from a company in the United States around what that actually means? Like that would be my personal guess. I guess there's gonna be a lot of, and I'm not.
Yeah, agreed.
I break stuff, but you know, when it comes to that, I mean, I think you're gonna have to request that, and it's gonna be very specific on what you're looking for, the type of block you need access to. I would expect that that's gonna be where that ultimately lays into play. And I would say, well, here I need all your incidents prior, you know, prior and future that may have impacted this specific one. I think that's overreach, but I mean, I don't know.
I thought I saw a question up here.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask, Mike, does some of this go into the potential TTIP agreement between Europe and the United States?
Probably not.
That's just gonna be just for manufacturing.
Anyone else? Any other questions for the panel? Back here?
This question may be a little bit vague, but I'm just thinking about some of the different things I'm hearing in terms of the climate with problems with government not being able to keep up and a lot of explosion in technology and just some of the things you were talking about. I was thinking about cloud computing and with the differences with laws. Do you suddenly find yourself blissfully ignorant of all of a sudden all of your data that you put in the cloud and you have this agreement and you think it's safe, and then all of a sudden you discover that the servers that are metaphorically described as the cloud are in another country, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of laws of that country apply to your data, and you don't have control over it anymore. So you know, those thoughts are occurring to me, and I guess my question is, how much do we have to be worried about naive decisions in regulation, naive decisions in government, such as requiring the keys to encryption? How much is that a threat to business?
I think it's huge.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think actions by legislators, by states attorney generals, you know, as an example, we had some folks that had a data privacy event. They lost nearly 4 million medical records. The state attorney general in the specific state that had most affected parties required a second year of credit monitoring, right? Just because they felt like 1 year of credit monitoring was enough. And you know, that ended up costing our client almost $1.5 million more. You know, so I think the actions of regulators, states AGs, legislators, can have a tremendous impact. And frankly, as David mentioned before, a lot of them do have kindergarten education. It's a big concern.
You know, your question is a very good one. It's impacting business as we speak. Okay, so because, you know, not only is there like a naivety among the legislators. They don't really get it, they don't really know it. And there's a disparity between the laws among countries. That's causing huge cost increases in connection with these deals. We do a lot of cloud deals, okay? And handling the data security and privacy aspects of putting into place a major cloud-based implementation, let's say it's a cloud-based ERP implementation, it adds significantly to the cost of the deal. You'd be surprised. The interesting irony is that most cloud vendors will secure your data better than you can. The downside is that most of them won't tell you that in a contract. So you have a real the interplay between what they can do and what they'll tell you they'll do makes getting these deals done very difficult, and it adds to the cost significantly. You know, but we are driving some of these deals are driving change, I think, in the industry, and I think cloud vendors are now sort of like coming up to speed and joining the real world in terms of being able to represent the warranty in the contracts, how they secure your data, where it's going to be stored, how it's going to be stored, providing you with appropriate audit reports so that you can actually analyze, look at how their facilities are maintained, look at their controls and that sort of thing. So.
You said you wanted to interact. I just have to jump in.
Please do.
Because the discussion, it's kind of like cloud is a generic, and it's not.
True.
So for any given thing that you're putting in the cloud, there's multiple layers. And so, for example, Azure just came out recently, so that's Microsoft, clearly delineating their responsibility and then what's the customer. And the customer may be our vendor, for example. So it's really interesting because a lot of times when I'm doing vendor assessments, they'll say, oh yeah, here's a SOC 2 report from whomever. Well, that's their responsibility. What about you?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, right,
Sure.
can't use you.
Well, that's a really good example. I mean, Microsoft, Azure, and Amazon AWS, they'll tell you what they do, but they won't represent and warrant what they'll do in a contract. So if you're a healthcare entity and you want to store protected health information somewhere using Amazon Web Services or whatever it is, you can do it right now because they won't sign a HIPAA business associated agreement with you, even though they'll tell you that their method of storing your data is HIPAA compliant. It's really odd, but you know, big companies, especially big vendors that have anything to do with the multiple layers of the cloud, are incredibly risk averse when it comes to stepping up to the plate in the contract. That's what we're finding.
And I think that that's really big because I always educate my customers that I support when we're like doing a proof of concept, you know, Mimecast, Proofpoint, whoever it might be, always ask the question. So when something new comes out, how are you going to help me support that? Do I owe you more money? Does my contract change? And then, or if I do have a problem, how long am I on customer support for? And those are questions that not a lot of companies are asking, and I think that that's big that you're doing that because that's going to show who will be in your environment for the long haul, that kind of thing.
And from a cloud provider perspective, it's interesting because a lot of times, like AWS is more standardized, but you can go to a lot of them like, hey, I need to perform, you know, an assessment or a penetration test or a red teaming exercise. A lot of times, like, no, you can't do that in our infrastructure. We run our own security scans. I'm like, oh man, you know. So it's interesting to see the cloud movement, and I think, you know, and I said this like probably 3 years ago. And I said, you know, the movement to the cloud is going to be one of those ones where, you know, it's going to take a little while, but you're going to start to see some pretty catastrophic breaches occur on those environments and a lot of data being exposed. And it's not just, you know, if you think about it, I mean, as an attacker, if I can compromise one company, hey, that's great, but if I can compromise 3,000 companies, that's awesome for me, right? Or if I can do ransomware on the cloud, oh my gosh, right? Like, you know, like that is a payday, right? So I think you're going to kind of see the evolution from a cloud-centric perspective be there. But the problem is it just takes, hackers are used to doing things a certain way. I'm used to doing things a certain way. Like when I do a pen test, for example, I do a pen test a very methodical way that I'm good at. But another person next to me that, you know, is another, like Larry, he pen tests a completely different way than myself. We come to the same goal, we come to the same way, but the ways that we do it are very different in nature because we're set in our ways. Cloud's a very interesting one because it's a newer technology. Granted, it's been around for like, you know, since the dawn of computers and BBSs, but It's just a different model. But from a actual technology perspective, getting into things like the hypervisor and going after things and being able to cross over to different virtual machines or even compromising the back-end infrastructure, that's relatively new for us on the hacking side. So it's just going to take a little bit longer for us to move to that, but it's coming. It's coming, and it's going to be coming, and it's going to be a big storm, and it's going to be interesting because if I can take down 3, 4, 5, maybe big cloud providers, that shakes our entire foundation of what we believe in the cloud-centric environments. That can go to a complete crash. So it'll be interesting to see. I think 2-3 years is probably the right spot. I said that 2 or 3 years ago, and I was wrong. And it's just because we are slow to adopt. So I'm thinking we're a little bit slower. So I think another 3 to 4, I'll get 4 years. We'll start to see it. Yeah. Modern Nostradamus, that's right, the technology side, right? So storm's coming in, but I think it'd be a 3.
So from your perspective, Dave, are you surprised that hasn't happened yet?
I'm not surprised. I think it has happened. I don't, and it has to some extent. Like AWS's backend manager got owned a couple times. Linode's backend infrastructure got owned a couple times. It is happening. It's just the implications of that aren't realized. Like if you get access to AWS's backend manager, it's everything. That's everything that you compromise. But it's not marketed that way. It's marketed like, oh hey, they found a flaw in our stuff and we patch and everything's good, right? So I think it's going to take some hacker like someone that did the hacking team exposure and does a whole write-up where he's like, hey, here's 3,000 terabytes of every customer data that this company has, and here you go and have fun. Like when that happens, it's going to send shivers down everybody's back. So I think that'll happen, and I think it'll happen in 3 years.
I'm absolutely amazed. This long the discussion's been going on. IoT.
Yeah, we haven't talked about IoT yet. Come on. When your toaster can you can toast a piece of bread from your from the car across the parking lot. That's amazing, right? Actually.
It's when that toaster can hack.
That's right. Yeah. I use my toaster for hacking all the time. It's smarter than I am now. It's amazing.
Says the guy that can have his car pull up right now.
Yes, I was going to say that.
IoT is an interesting concept because everybody wants availability for things immediately, and that's not just a trend in SCADA infrastructure, PLCs, the energy sector, and automation and manufacturing. It's just a trend all across the board. There's toilets now that are fully automated where you can preheat the seat before you get into it, so that you can do a bidet as you're sitting there from your phone. I don't understand it, but hackers actually hacked that toilet and had it shooting out water in the middle of the stage. It was amazing. But the IoT piece is interesting because you're taking companies that are traditionally manufacturing and you're influxing in technology. And that's really where the automotive industry is right now, because the automotive industry, think of the automotive industry as a manufacturing company. They've always been a manufacturing company, right? And now they're influxing in these different vendors that have these new pieces of technology, like Uconnect or whatever it ends up being as these integrated pieces into the cars. And they're literally black boxes that they're plugging into these cars, and they get some software diagnostics and things that they can actually do as part of it. But for the most part, they have no idea what vulnerabilities they're introducing because they're not a software development company. And so with tech in cars, it's very scary. But tech in anywhere where you have a manufacturing company that doesn't treat their company as a software development company now is really going to struggle down the road. And you're seeing that with GM, Ford, everybody. It's not, they haven't flipped that switch yet to say, okay, we're a tech company first. And that's why Tesla is killing it, because they consider themselves a software development company, not a manufacturer of cars. So they released OTA, and all of a sudden, security. Hackers did a presentation at DerbyCon. And literally, as the hackers were doing a presentation at DerbyCon, they pushed an OTA update to all their cars that fixed the vulnerability. As they were giving the talk. It took USB thumb drives to actually go to each individual car to fix the ones that Charlie did. So, it's a different market, different mindset, but that's where the IoT folks are at right now. Some of the newer ones, like when Nest came out, Nest did a little bit different because they consider themselves a software development company first. They didn't have all the historical legacy stuff. But the big companies, like something really cool happened recently. It was like super cool. What's the name of it? Hue, Philip Hue. Anybody ever seen the Philip Hue systems? They're smart lights that use Bluetooth to communicate. Basically, you have a LED light that you can plug into your house that doesn't require any rewiring, and you can control everything through Bluetooth. But one of the dudes that originally wrote the RSA encryption key, he made this really insane, it looked like something out of like Ghostbusters, like a proton pack. And it would actually send frequencies to the light, and we use the light to trigger the Bluetooth and then actually piggyback that connection through your network to actually be able to back in your home network, so you can communicate to your home network through the light. So you can see the light, you can hack the home network and not have to worry about any encryption. It's so cool, right? But there was no security that was built into the Philip Hue, right? They didn't have any protections or ways of actually doing it. So I think IoT is going to be one of those new avenues of attack that keeps us continuously busy, although we're not busy enough right now, right? But anything that's new with this that's coming out, it's going to be significantly challenging for most companies.
I'll give you an example of one segment of IoT that is burgeoning now, and we just did an entire conference on 3D printing and additive manufacturing, and we listened to the chief IP counsel from Caterpillar talk about his company transitioning to being a software business. Okay, Caterpillar makes big, massive trucks, okay, and other machinery, and he considers his business to be in transition to being a software company. They will no longer be, 10 years from now, they're not going to be manufacturing anything. All their stuff's going to be manufactured by jobbers all over the world. They're going to be an IP licensing company that takes their software, their CAD/CAM renderings, and ships them over some high-speed pipe, to jobbers all over the world, and has product manufactured. So you're talking about it's I consider it to be a little subsection of IoT that happens to Intel manufacturing. But talk about hacking into trade secrets and other intellectual property companies that are making that shift now. Traditional heavy manufacturing businesses that are thinking about themselves in a completely different way.
To add to that, not only the intellectual property, but the insurance industry, frankly, is shuddering when you're talking about IoT, because the bodily injury and property damage that could result from these types of events, the aggregation of bodily injury.
Lawyers are happy.
Yeah.
It's like everything else. There's a winner and there's a loser. Yeah.
Ryan can back us up on this from just from a TrustedSec perspective, but I mean, you're getting more and more calls now from car manufacturers, from folks that are developing IoT type devices, new tech that's coming out. I mean, how many prototypes have we gone to that isn't even really stuff public that they go through? I mean,
absolutely. We're getting at least twice a week. We at least get phone calls for different things that we're excited to customize.
So it's definitely something. I mean, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I think IoT is a great thing. I think it's you look at the adaptation and where we're going. We're having autonomous cars for crying out loud. That's IoT based. I mean, autonomous cars have to talk, centrally and have to work with each other to actually work. I mean, it's definitely going to be a benefit. It's going to continue to increase our technology and our ability to integrate technology into business and to what we're doing on a regular basis. But it comes with a cost. It comes with a cost, and unfortunately or fortunately, that's something that we're going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, another question up here.
You see in the future when you buy a car, you go for the options. You can tell the salesman, geez, I want a Mac-based car or a Microsoft-based car.
Interesting
I
enough,
mean, is it going to get to that point?
Tesla's running a gutted version of Linux, and absolutely. I mean, some of them have integration into Android and iPhones as being kind of the two predominant ones. I don't really know anybody integrating to Windows much except for like the Microsoft Sync stuff that is on there. But,
Ford.
What's that?
Ford. My car's Microsoft-based.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting though is I think there are computers in cars. There's lots of computers in cars. Many things that control things like ECU and all these other different components that are computers. The interesting part though is we've never had actual computers running the whole car. And so a computer that can control the steering wheel. I don't know if you know or not, but your steering wheel is part of a network called CAN, a car area network, and all of us actually send data through an actual communication that if you can tap into, I can make my steering wheel go this way or whatever, I hit the gas or the brake, and that's all sent down to a central computer that manages and does all those, and now that's interconnected to a central server on the internet, that communicates back and forth. So I think, interesting enough, the infrastructure to support that and the attacks that will happen there will be the most important piece of that. I mean, Tesla does a pretty decent job, although they're not impervious in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, it's going to be one of those ones that is going to be the latest and greatest. But yeah, can you go and have a Mac? Well, Apple's coming out with an autonomous car as well. So they already bought a couple of small companies. It's well known, secret on the Apple market that Apple's coming out with an autonomous car to compete with Tesla and Google. Google's coming out with their own, so that'll be Android based. So yeah, I mean, you go buy a Google car and it's Android based. You go and buy an Apple car and it's iOS based. You go and buy a Tesla and it's Linux based. So, absolutely. We'll be at level 4 autonomous mode in 4 years according to Elon Musk. So, to the point to where literally you have an Uber app on your phone and you select an Uber app and it picks you up and there's no driver in the car. That's at the point where we're getting to these types of things, which is really cool. So my car almost does it. I'm on literally if anybody see me on a red Tesla, I'm literally on the freeway like this.
And it's actually safer than having a
Yeah.
That is very true.
It's much safer running with autopilot than this.
There's Dave. Dave's a great guy. There's driving Dave too.
The joke at the office is driving Dave has come out. So.
You see that red Tesla turn around. Question back here, sir.
This is probably more for Spencer and Mike. If I'm an attacker and I'm able to breach and I get credit card data, and then you guys offer credit monitoring, to the end users or to the 5 million account holders, whoever.
False sense of security.
Yeah. So I find out about that because obviously it's going to be published on the news. I'm going to wait a year, in this case 2 years, to use that data, and I'm just going to sit on it because I know it's worth money. Is the company then still out of the clear since all this has gone through and taken place, or once I start utilizing that data after 2 years, is the company going to be in trouble again?
That is a very good question. I think the hackers that are gaining the information, you guys can tell me differently. But my guess
I'm
is
the one that's getting
just saying, you got to run Tesla with the direction.
I know a lot about ransomware.
My guess is the vast majority of that information is they want to sell it as quickly as possible, so they don't want to hang on to it on a regular basis.
Yeah, but say it goes and it exchanges 2-3 hands, kind of like a mortgage.
Yeah, credit cards though are something that's kind of a point in time. As soon as they are determined to be fraudulent, they're canceled and they're reissued and they're no longer valid. I think a larger question there is person identifiable information, social security numbers that are actively being used for fraud. And that is absolutely, you can use those 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years on the road. Unless, I don't know, is it possible to get a new social security number? I don't know, but
It's very difficult.
very difficult, right? Yeah.
Possible.
So, and I know I just sent my social security number through email just a couple days. No, you're just kidding. But the thing with PII is that you look at Anthem, for example. They had millions and millions and millions of people's social security numbers on there, and they provide 3 or 5 years worth of fraud services. That is absolutely squat to something. So you almost have to have 24/7, 365. Till you die, fraud monitoring, credit services that are going to happen out there. And what's funny is I'm part of the OPM breach. So OPM government got hacked, all their clearances and all that good stuff. So apparently I'm good at that. But I got that. So I have credit card fraud monitoring services from the government for 5 years. Then I was part of Anthem, which then I got another 3 years of fraud service from a different company. I also happened to buy LifeLock. I've had it since I was like 2005. It's a good insurance policy. If you lose all your stuff, at least they fix it for you. So I have 4 fraud service monitors. So I gotta be good, right? I would hope so. But but it can happen anytime.
I'll top that. 14 concurrent credit monitoring.
So many people are. Okay, so I'll save you guys a lot of money. Okay, first of all, the answer to your question is the company's still vulnerable. The biggest
So like in Dave's case, Anthem could still be.
if the company did something wrong, if the company was negligent, didn't satisfy its duties to take reasonable steps to preserve the secrecy of your data, and it got hacked, the plaintiff's bar, the single biggest growth area in the plaintiff's bar right now is class action lawsuits in privacy and security. Okay, and so those companies are going to be vulnerable till the statute of limitations runs. Okay, if you're on the receiving end of that and you're, I don't have any credit monitoring service, but I do the thing that I think is the most preventive thing is I've had a security freeze on all 3 of my credit agency reports for probably 10 years. It's a complete freeze. It's not a fraud monitoring service. Okay, if somebody tries to check credit, they get a black screen. Okay, Is it perfect? It's not. Nothing is perfect, but is it pretty good? Because most hackers, if they get a black screen, okay, they're on to the next Social Security number. They're not wasting a lot of time, and effort trying to figure out how to get my report when they got a million other ones. So, I like the insurance because, if you do suffer a loss, at least you got a claim that can be made. It's fine. But when we do data breach notifications, we don't only talk about the insurance. We also tell every affected person how to put a security freeze on their credit, report at all three agencies. And that to me is more highly protective of the things that Dave's talking about. Not credit cards, but your Social Security number, things that people can actually draw, try to open credit accounts for you. So.
Is that an easy process doing that?
Very easy.
Yeah, very easy.
Takes less than 5 minutes and every
So, Michael, you said it's the big growth area in the plaintiff's bar.
Absolutely.
So when are we gonna see the ads on television?
You know what? It's so funny. They're so busy, they don't even need advertising. Okay? There's a couple of firms in Cleveland that you don't even know their names, and they're making money hand over fist. It's unbelievable. Almost every breach of any size results in a class action lawsuit right now. Okay? It's just happening everywhere. Anthem got sued out the wazoo. I mean, they're still fighting lawsuits, and they will for years.
So I got paid out, well, they just settled, right? And they paid out like something like 500 million or something like that. I mean,
I got a check from PayPal for a class action for like $100.
Yeah.
I didn't even know if there was a suit.
Yeah. I mean,
is that what you're talking about?
yeah, tricks are on you tonight.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with class action, it's so easy to find a plaintiff, It's so easy, it's so
I
much
didn't know it was a
easier.
plaintiff.
Yeah. So, but that is, we just did a big cybersecurity conference at Cleveland State Law School, and I had a whole panel of plaintiffs' lawyers who do nothing but class action work in privacy and security. All of it.
Another question back here?
Is it hopeless if you have a breach in terms of defending yourself against a probable class action suit? Or are there things that you can do proactively, figuring that the future is a minefield and you can do everything right and still step on something?
See, now that might be the best question of the day. Because that leads into something I want to talk about. I know these guys are going to want to talk about, and that is front-end compliance, okay? Most companies right now are so heavily focused on what happens when there's a breach. Almost every question we've had today has been focused on that, right? If you just take care of yourself on the front end, and that doesn't mean absolutely securing your network or your systems. It means taking reasonable steps, having policies in place, hiring people like you see on this panel to come in and do the front end work. It is so much less expensive than having to figure it out on the back end after you suffered a breach. And yet most companies, other than companies in regulated industries, from a data security perspective, aren't doing enough front-end compliance work. They're not talking about it, they're not doing tabletops, they're not putting policies in place, they're not doing pen testing, they're not doing this kind of thing until after almost every company that gets stung, the light goes on, But I think what's going to happen actually is, so there is hope as long as you're proactive and willing to spend a little bit of money to do some very reasonable things on the front end. And not wait till after you suffer a breach. You can defend much more easily. Your people who suffer a breach are much less likely to sue you when they think you've been reasonable than when they think you've been negligent and are really, really angry at you. And again, it's so much less expensive. I think the next big wave in lawsuits is going to be boards of directors of major companies. Most of the boards of directors of major
They're getting
companies
targeted quite heavily, aren't they?
right now, and D&O coverage typically does not cover failures in the data security world because those policies were written without any regard for the systems.
And who's going after the shareholders?
Shareholders and plaintiffs.
All right, so one final question, and we're going to wrap it. Unfortunately, we have to get to a break, and then so we can kind of stay on track. So this will be the last one.
Unfortunately, we have to go to a break and then next.
Basically, we're going to go to break, and then Dave's on for his keynote.
So I'm gonna ask permission to ask this question.
You've been granted
Because it's
permission.
not for the people on this side of
Okay.
the dividing line. So I'm curious, feel free not to fess up. how many people on our side of the panel have dealt with a breach?
Ever?
Ever? Okay, I was just curious.
Will everybody in the next 3 years, before or after
The cloud takedown?
All right, so on behalf of Binary Defense, I want to thank again our co-sponsors and partners. You guys did an awesome job, and we very much appreciate you not only participating in the day with us, but participating in the panel. So thank you very much. 10 to 12-minute break. Go out, kind of mill about, go outside and get some air if you want, and then we're going to be back in this room to close out the day with Dave Kennedy's keynote. Thanks, everybody.